What's going on, guys? Knight here, and today I am announcing that I am quitting One Piece Treasure Cruise. In this video, going to talk about some of the reasons on why I decided to take a leave from the game, and um, to give a quick TLDR. Currently not a fan of the current game's direction as of all the events that have happened for the past couple of years or so, and the future direction that it plans to go into. The disappointing anniversary that we've had on the Japanese version, lack of enjoyable content for myself. Also, the game runs like it did when it first released, basically in 2014, and also issue that I personally have with the game, which is in the form of gambling addiction. So without further ado, let's hop right into all the stuff. So first off, gonna knock out the gambling addiction part. Um, yeah, I really like pulling on One Piece Treasure Cruise, as it is probably like the second best thing to do on the game after team building, in my opinion. And it hasn't been too much of an issue recently, but I have always have the urge to pull on every banner, because especially nowadays where a lot of the new limited characters and whatnot are really important to have and are extremely good in their own right. It's kind of harder and harder with each new character not to pull for them, so that has gone into the gambling addiction, as well as, with more tempting sales on the Japanese version being more readily available. It's a lot easier to be more willing to spend money on the game, whereas maybe on the global version, with the sales aren't as desirable, it's not as desirable to put more money into the game unless there's like a big Sugo Fest going on. But yeah, hasn't been an issue this anniversary too bad. I haven't went too overboard, but that is something that I'm trying to prevent. So to try not to get into a situation that bad, I am just trying to avoid doing all of that. And I don't think playing the game free to play would be a viable option for me, just because, like I said, especially with all the brand new characters that come out, like the brand new TM rare recruits, all having really fantastic support banners coming out, the Kizuna banners, which are pretty fantastic, and they have also the Kizuna limited legends, and then also limited legends that come out every other week, it seems like nowadays. It's pretty hard not to try and spend money, and even if I did try to go free to play, I know that I would eventually be drawn into trying to spend more money again, so I don't think that would be a viable option for myself. So, next thing, not a fan of the current game direction and feature direction, so I'm going to be addressing a lot of things that have been happening for the past couple of years, as well as some future stuff that is going to happen. So, not a fan of the current content rotation, always Arena, Treasure Map, and Kizuna. There's usually nothing in between those pieces of content, and just leaves the game pretty stale and boring, in my opinion, and not really a fan of that direction. Few raid occurrences. If you are a longtime player, then you know that raids have been always a big staple in Treasure Cruise, and recently there hasn't been a ton of raids coming out. As you can see, right now only the Shinobu is up, as Chopper and Usopp left yesterday. And between the last couple of raids, we had our first raid of the year in January, which was the raid Luffy Taro, and then the next raid that came out was raid Marco, which I believe was like in March or April, something like that. And then we had the Usopp and Chopper raid that came out for May. So there was a big gap in between like the raids releases, and also the raids also haven't been that good, especially the Usopp and Chopper, especially since the fact that they are a global first raid that came out like 2 years ago for them, and they haven't been improved, so they're still just as bad as they were when they released on global, and it's extremely bad on the Japanese side just because of how far the JP meta is compared to the global meta. So that's pretty bad. Back to back limited banners, there was the Super Sugo Fest for an anniversary, and then right after that, they just throw another limited banner at us. Not a huge fan of that. They did the same thing with the Sanji Puddin as well as and then right after Sanji Puddin, it was Roger Odin, which at the time I didn't think it was the worst thing in the world, but it's just a lot worse with this anniversary just because, we had Capone Crew, which came out right before, then it was the anniversary, and then on top of that, they had the Ace and Sabo, which, I don't know, it's just really hard to keep up, especially if you're like a free-to-play player. Definitely not really a good sign with all the limited banners coming back to back to back. Another thing I take issue with is Last Tap. If you have been keeping up with the previous Kizuna that just ended with the Super Bosses, Last Tap is pretty essential to it, even though you can like get around it by using cheese methods, but those methods will probably be taken out, just like how after the first couple of Kizunas, we weren't able to use like Brook and Fujitora Magellan cheese. So eventually you're going to have to rely on Last Tap, and Last Tap isn't readily available. You have to go pretty balls deep in to the banners to get full usage of Last Tap, acquiring multiple copies of characters, and not a fan of this direction. Very similar to Dokkan, where if you don't have characters max, you're basically dealing a lot less than someone who goes out of their way to spend a lot more money than you to get those final Last Tap abilities, and not a really big fan of that aspect. The game is also unforgiving if you take a break. I haven't personally taken a break from this game, so I haven't experienced that, but from many people that I've talked to, taking a break is like what is a lot worse than playing the game consistently, because you miss out on a lot of characters. Like if you take a month off, potentially when they create characters like this Blackbeard who don't tend to come back, they're limited to one like event where you have to farm it, and then they usually don't come back, and then you're stuck for that month where this Blackbeard might be required for a lot of content, and then you just have no access to this character at all. They should be putting these characters like in the lockable section or in the arena section, but when they do this, it takes several months for these characters to come back, so you're stuck in a loop of missing characters that are free to play but are just unattainable at all for several months. Something else I take issue with is that there is no JP community manager. At least on global, there is a community manager. So if there is someone that you wanted to complain to or voice issues with, there was someone to talk to. But on the Japanese version, at least to my knowledge, there isn't a JP community manager. So there's no one where we could really voice our issues to. And that's a huge issue just because there are a lot of things wrong with the Japanese version, as there are things wrong with the global version, but there isn't anyone for JP players to talk to and voice their opinions about it. So, not a fan of that. even though I don't speak Japanese myself, I'm sure there's several ways I could get in contact with many other people in the community who are talented enough and are multilingual who do speak Japanese, so we would be able to voice our opinions in that way. But with no community manager, there's not really a way to accurately voice our opinions to the JP side of OPTC to let them know that, hey, there's some stuff that should have some changes to it that you guys just aren't addressing. Also, newer free to play characters and 6 pluses are currently very forgettable nowadays. Ever since they started bringing those 6 plus characters into the Kizuna, they have been very forgettable. I don't think I've used any of those 6 pluses outside of like the treasure map where they were debuted for, and it's just really unfortunate because like 6 plus used to be a really huge thing. They made great improvements to the characters most of the time, but sometimes they were duds. But a lot of the times they were very big improvements, and now they're all pretty forgettable for the most part. Maybe this brand new Germa 6 Plus or Smoker 6 Plus, whichever one gets it, will be a first step in the right direction with 6 Pluses, but I highly doubt it. And then newer free to play characters aren't really that memorable nowadays. If you have played Treasure Cruise since like the beginning of Treasure Map, actually, this is the wrong button. Since the beginning of Treasure Map, you would know that a lot of the early Treasure Map characters were considered like the god tier characters. Like these characters were like some of the best characters in the game, and if you didn't have them, like you were like screwed. But like they were worth farming for. And then nowadays, like most of these characters that we have currently, like you almost never use. Like Queen's a great character, but besides that, and Jinbei, like the last like 2 rows of characters are pretty forgettable characters in my opinion. So not really great compared to like characters like Mihawk, which was like better than a lot of legends and was actually a viable captain at the time as well. So really just sad to see how the characters have depreciated over time. And let's talk about some other things. So the anniversary also was pretty lackluster in my opinion. Lack of content, all the rotation stuff like the arena, treasure map, and Kizuna. Most of that happened before the anniversary came out. So we had the raid Chopper and Usopp, which was a global first raid, and then the arena Shinobu, which also came out before. But they also didn't make it too exciting just because the fact that they introduced 100% skill up before, so you only had to farm like 15 copies. So you only had to do like 5 runs at max if you're doing triple stamina, and then you were done with farming the event. So literally nothing to do after you completed all of those events, and then there was only banners left over. So the only thing to really do during that time was to pull and then play these GARP challenges, which were very few. Only Hody, Rev, and Dofi. I mean, not Dofi, Garp 2, which is really unfortunate because there should be more free to play gems available during the anniversary, which is another gripe that I have. But, they didn't have that in Garp challenges. Last year we had a lot more GARP challenges available, and this year they decided to cut that in half and only give us 46 gems, which is still pretty disappointing. Also, another thing that I have issue with the game is lack of enjoyable content for myself. There hasn't been a lot of like challenge content in the last couple of months, and what I mean by challenge content are stuff like the event that came out for Wano Law and the low cost Brook Island event that came out recently on Global, like stuff like that. I really enjoyed playing that type of content. They were pretty fun to build teams around. As I mentioned before, team building was probably my favorite aspect of the game, and there just hasn't been anything of that nature recently. We also haven't had a brand new 13-star Garb challenge in a long time, which is really disappointing because those were also pretty fun to play with. I had a lot of fun when Dofi 2 came back for the first time in several months since Roger Odin's release. That was the last time we had Dofi 2 on the Japanese version, and I was really happy when that came back because I was able to build some pretty cool teams around it. But since then, there hasn't been a new 13-star Garb challenge since Rev 2, which was pretty disappointing, and I am not a huge fan of that. And then finally, the game still runs like it did basically in 2014. There is a lack and low amount of limit break materials obtainable inside and outside of treasure map. So if we look at the current gem sales, you could see that you could spend like $24 USD and you get quite a hefty amount of or is it, yeah, $24 USD. You get a hefty amount of limit break materials. You see that? 8 shards. That's pretty great value, I would say. Spend $24, get 8 shards, and let's see, you spend $50 and you get 4 crystals. Like, whoa, gotta love that. Pretty great value. 4 shards here for $8. Like, wow, nice value. Anyways, also there isn't really a streamlined way of feeding characters nowadays, as there are several thousands of characters in the pool of characters that are pullable. There's no streamlined way of feeding those characters in a quick manner, as it still takes several hours and even several minutes for many people if you are just selling those characters to race shop or just feeding them deeps really quickly. Just takes a long time in general just to clean out your box after doing several pulls on the Seagull Fest, which is just pretty bad overall. But yeah, that's it for me in terms of OBTC stuff. Hopefully, this clears up some things. But talking about the channel and going forward with Treasure Cruise stuff, I plan to delete the app relatively soon. So, but I won't do it on video because I feel like they'll be a bit disrespectful. But it is what it is. In terms of my channel, won't be doing any more OPTC stuff because I won't have my account, so that makes sense. I gave my global account information to Stump D Gotcha, so I don't know if he forgot about it or if he's planning to do something in the future with it, but I gave it to him so he could give that account away. It had pretty much all the legends on global for the most part, except for maybe like 12, and like 2 of them are like the Kaido and Zoro because that banner wasn't out yet, but pretty much has almost every legend on the global version and pretty solid account overall. So hopefully that goes to someone in the right hand that maybe wants that account. As far as my YouTube channel, like I said, no more OPTC stuff, but I do still want to make YouTube content because I do enjoy doing that stuff, but I won't be doing any more gotcha content, so you don't have to worry about me becoming a gotcha fanatic or anything like that. But plan to still do YouTube stuff, so if you want to stick around for that, feel free to. That would be appreciated. But if you don't want to, that's also fine as well. Feel free to leave if you want. If you guys are interested in more OPTC Japan YouTubers, there are plenty to pick from. There's Maniac 11, I think it is, or Maniac 1, something like that. Samuel R96, there's Corazon, there's Snaf King, there's Snowman, plenty of other avenues you can go to for your Treasure Cruise content. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me in terms of this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.
That's all, folks.